right, gang. So, technically speaking, what's happening here, the fundamental reason why Trump is doing so well in the polls is that Trump is crushing it with voter groups that overwhelmingly went with Biden in 2020, or Hillary for that matter in 2016. In other words, and this is key for your analysis here of understanding what's going on, Trump is vastly overperforming among voter groups that Republicans always underperform with. Trump is overperforming with voter groups that Republicans always underperform with.
Hey, gang, up until now, the central bank digital dollar, CBDC, has been nothing more than a headline. But you may have noticed right now things are developing at a very rapid and very ominous pace. It started with a sweeping executive order from the Biden administration, and now central banks are out there even hiring for their development. Here's the thing, gang. A digital dollar can be used to track your purchases, control what you buy, and even seize or freeze your assets, just like what they did to the Freedom Convoy protesters. That's why it's absolutely critical you protect your money with precious metals like gold and silver. I've partnered with the top-rated precious metals company, Goldco, because they're a great company with an amazing reputation. Right now, they're giving you up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last if you open up an account with them. And to make it even sweeter, gang, all qualified callers this week will receive a free Ronald Reagan silver coin. But that's a limited time offer, so don't wait. And definitely don't wait until all your money is under Biden's control. Click on that link below right now to learn how you can get started today.
Rich Barris of the People's Pundit, I have a wonderful interview with him this weekend coming up. He was way ahead of the curve on this. He noticed this in his polling months back. He's been way ahead of the curve. And by the way, gang, if you have any questions, just throw them in the not the chat there. I'm sorry. Throw it into the super sticker and super chats. I will answer them in due course. But Rich recognized that Trump won, say, with 12% of the black vote in 2020, which is a historic high for the Republican candidate. But according to Rich, Trump's polling among blacks right now is an astonishing 19%. Black voters are literally rushing to Trump in ways they have not done in over 40 years for any Republican candidate. And not only that, he found that the voter intensity among black voters for Trump is off the charts. Upwards of 40% of these Trump-supporting black voters, 37% specifically, would either write in Trump's name on the ballot if he's not the nominee, or they wouldn't vote. They wouldn't vote at all. 40%. I mean, that's an insane level of voter enthusiasm. And it's not just Rich's polling. Look at this from Fox News. Trump's polling 20% among black voters. Again, this is unprecedented. Biden's collapsed 30 points from 91% support in 2020 to just 61% support today. Again, this among the Democrats' historically most loyal voting constituency. And the Democratic pundits that comprise the legacy media are openly sounding the alarm on this. The New York Times just published a panicked piece. And get this, their analysis has concluded that Biden's polling numbers among black and Hispanic Democrats are the worst since Walter Mondale's presidential debacle in 1984. This is what we're talking about, Mondale level support. Democrat analysts have not seen this low a support for Democratic presidential candidate among black and Latino voters since Mondale. Now, gang, this is a trend that we on this channel have been following with for months now. The non-white working class are defecting away from Biden in record numbers, and they're all going to Trump, not to Republicans. That's an important caveat. They're not flocking to the Republicans. They're flocking to Trump. Trump has effectively severed what was once a 70-point lead among this constituency for Barack Obama. Obama had a 70-point margin with non-white working class voters. Now Biden has just a 10-point margin among that same demographic. But Biden simply can't win with margins that low among constituents that are absolutely necessary for Democrat election victories. Now, the reason why this is happening, I think, is absolutely fascinating. The reason why Democrats are losing more and more of these disaffected non-white voters, I would argue, goes way beyond economics, right? Like that panic MSNBC article alluded to. Oh, the gas prices are too high. No, they could deal with high gas prices if they really supported a candidate. It's not because of that. It's fundamentally, I would argue, because the Democratic Party is more and more being seen by more and more voters, particularly minority voters, as the party of the establishment. It's the party of the man. It's the party of special interests and donors and billionaires and bureaucrats who collectively rule for their own benefit at the expense of the benefit of the people. And there's simply never been a time when so many felt so alienated from their public institutions. A recent Gallup survey found that trust in our nation's fundamental institutions, from our federal government to our legacy news media, to our law enforcement, to our elections, is at an all-time low, and is one of the lowest for any nation in the world. And the Democrats are increasingly being seen as the party of that establishment. And Trump, more than anyone else, exposed the Democrat Party to be what it truly is. What happened in 2016 is Trump effectively redefined American politics away from a Republican versus Democrat divide, right? That's been the case over the last several decades, defining every single presidential race. He transformed the traditional Republican versus Democrat divide. So you get your Republican constituencies over here and your Democrat constituency over there. You line them all up. You try to convince as much of the independent vote as possible. And then whoever convinces most of the independent vote wins. Trump transformed that. Trump turned that around. It wasn't Republican versus Democrat anymore, as we're finding out increasingly with all the rhino Republicans that are doing everything they can to get rid of Trump. It's no longer Republican versus Democrat. What did he do? He realigned politics around the people versus the political class, the ruled versus their corrupt rulers, the voters versus the establishment. That's what Drain the Swamp is all about. And this is so essential to get to understand Trump's growing appeal, particularly among the non-white working class. Trump effectively transformed American politics into a formal animosity between the people versus a corrupt establishment. And what we're finding is that more and more and more voters are aligning themselves with that new political paradigm shift. What Trump did is he cast himself as the champion of the people, as over and against the corrupt political class, with the result that every time he gets impeached when in office, or every time he gets indicted when out of office, he looks to be the target of the permanent political class's diabolical corruption. In other words, every time the establishment looks like they're trying to take Trump out, they only confirm both the Trumpian realignment of politics around people versus the permanent political class, and Trump's unparalleled position as the champion of the people, as over and against that corrupt political class. And the brilliance of what Trump has done is he's redefined the Democratic Party as the party of that corruption. Now, we all know it's wider than that. It's the establishment. I think he's done that. That's why these non-white working class voters are not running over to the Republicans. They're running over to Trump because they see that. They've experienced that. They've experienced those kind of social inequities that Trump is now, as it were, mainstreaming among all people versus this oligarchical aristocracy that rules and controls for their own benefit at the expense of everyone else. And of course, Trump's not alone in this. This scenario of that permanent corrupt political class trying to persecute the champion of the people plays itself out time and time again with astonishing political victories. Bibi Netanyahu in Israel, Lula in Brazil, Khan in Pakistan, Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Politicians who effectively cast themselves as the champion of the people versus a corrupt, persecuting political class tend to grow in popularity the more they're publicly persecuted. I think it is that very predictable pattern that's operative here. That's exactly what we're seeing play out right before our very eyes. It explains why Trump's polls are expanding and growing and surging. It explains why disaffected voters who have felt disaffectively disenfranchised from our social institutions and the permanent political class are so attracted to Trump. And it shows why the Democratic Party and Biden in particular are imploding in support. When all is said and done, when this colossal web of corporate and political corruption finally comes tumbling down, the irony in all of this is that the very media that pushed the Democratic Party on us, the very media that pushed their corruption as somehow pristine, the very media that did everything they could to hide and cover up the shenanigans around 2020, the very media that did everything they could to hide Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's radical corruption, the very media that's done everything they possibly can to themselves persecute Trump. Ironically, when this political corruption finally comes tumbling down, and it will, ironically, woke leftists at CNN and MSNBC will only have themselves to blame for it.